Al-Qaeda continues to be the greatest threat on the freedoms and democracies of the world. But how factual is the myth of Al-Qaeda as a campaign of terror? And what has Al-Qaeda become today? Join Gary this Tuesday, November 8th at noon with his special guest, Dr. Fawaz Girgis, professor of Middle Eastern politics at the London School of Economics and author of The Rise and Fall of Al-Qaeda, for an in-depth conversation to discredit the myth of a global network threatening the American future. So tune in to Gary Null this Tuesday at noon, only here on the Progressive Radio Network, your home to hear conversations that matter to inspire change that makes a difference.
Progressive Radio Network is now on iTunes. Search for us to listen and download past shows or get them updated automatically. Just type Progressive Radio Network in the search bar and download any show free of charge. Progressive Radio Network. Information for the independent mind.
Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin. I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to be focusing on healing and very much a holistic perspective, as you would imagine, on A Better World, on healing. After all, many of you know that my own background is in holistic psychotherapy, also called in some ways transpersonal psychology, and acupuncture. So I've been in the holistic health field for a long time. And one of the luminaries is going to be our guest today, who I have long looked up to because he broke rank with the medical establishment very early on, truly some 30 years ago, and had struck out on his own to speak the truth as he saw it about the very true nature of healing. And that is Dr. Bernie Siegel. Bernie has had an really distinguished career for so long, through the books he's written, through his teaching, through his exceptional cancer patient group that spread all over, really probably the world, certainly this country, where in a unique form of group therapy, dream therapy, art therapy, combined together in a support system of people talking about what it is going on with them in their hearts and their bodies and their souls. And through Bernie's facilitation, his tutelage, his true loving support as a medical doctor, healer, and teacher, and I'd say friend of these people that were under his care in a context he referred to as carefrontation, very, very cleverly. A lot of people started to get better. They began to get healed. Some were using the conventional treatments, and some were not. No matter. Healing started to take place in a way that medical science, as we know it, was not really able to predict or account for. And Bernie has really been credited largely with the kind of creating a context, if you will, for this kind of healing to take place. After all, I think Bernie would agree, and we'll be bringing him on the line in a moment, that nature heals, or you could say God heals, and we participate as best we can in that process. But this was really inspiring to me as a young and budding healer, therapist, and acupuncturist to hear that there was a surgeon at Yale New Haven Hospital, of all places, which was really not far from where I myself grew up and started to practice, had struck out on his own to speak as he saw it, and didn't really pay that much attention to the opinions of his colleagues. So with that kind of courage, Bernie went on to write probably about a dozen books, and Love, Medicine, and Miracles is what kicked off the entire enterprise, if you will. And it was read literally by millions across the world and brought Bernie Siegel to a point of notoriety and recognition for the good work that he's been doing that has continued truly throughout these 30 years, with his latest book being the primary subject of today's show, A Book of Miracles, inspiring true stories of healing, gratitude, and love. So we're going to be sticking our nose into this book and into the underlying thoughts and themes that run throughout it and Bernie's life work. Dr. Siegel, are you there?
I'm listening.
Well, now is your chance to correct me. But first of all, I just really do want to say welcome to A Better World, and I'm so glad to have you on. Really, you have been an inspiration to myself and many of my colleagues for a long, long time.
Thank you. You know, as crazy as this may sound, I look for people who say things like that about me, because what I've learned is, and I would tell everybody listening to use this as a test, how do the people of the world seem to you? See, if they're inspiring people, then you've got inspiration within you. And if you have a negative view of the world, there's a lot of negativity in you that you're projecting onto others. Mm-hmm. So I see myself as a coach, and when people come up with these, life-enhancing words, I know it's a part of them, and that my coaching will really have quite an effect. And I may add, I live by my experience, not my belief. I mean, I grew up loved by parents and grandparents. I was not afraid to be different, and therefore go off on this other path. But what changed my life, literally, just the end of her statement to me was, I need to know how to live between office visits. Because she said, she felt better in the office, but she couldn't take me home with her. So she needed to know how to live between office visits.
Yes.
And what I learned was...
In fact, that's the name of one of your books.
Yeah, How to Live Between Office Visits, right. Because, that's what we all need to know, how to get through the day and focus on that. But what I noticed was how few people were willing to try to change their lives. That they were afraid of failure. And that's why I say how important it is that we parent our children in a way that makes them feel worthy, and not afraid of challenges.
You may have been somewhat fortunate, Bernie, because to have had parents and grandparents who encourage you to just be yourself no matter what is not your typical situation.
No, absolutely.
How is it?
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that. That was your background.
Into so much criticism and problems because everybody started blaming me. If I would say to a patient, what's going on in your life? Because those were messages I got from my parents. If something went wrong, okay, God is redirecting you. Do what'll make you happy. You were to pay attention to feelings, use your difficulties. I always say the way hunger leads you to nourishment. So if you had a problem, okay, what do we need to do to nourish you in your life and so forth?
Yes.
And, I used to say to people, what mottos do you live by? And then they began to say, you didn't ask us what mottos we're dying by. The hypnotic messages from their parents.
Exactly.
But what I learned was, to make a long story short, when you help people live, they didn't die when they were supposed to. And one of the things that I find...
Whatever that means, supposed to. It brings everything into question. What the doctors say and what reality is seems like it's rather disparate,
Yeah, that's why I love the word potential. I say to people, look at your potential.
Yes.
What are we capable of? And then you learn, because so many doctors, I hear this so often that it's beginning to drive me nuts. The doctor said I was doing very well, and whatever I'm doing, keep it up. Now, I mean, this person is glad the doctor said that, because the doctor is realizing that she's doing things, more than traditional. But why doesn't the doctor say, you're doing very well. Sit down and tell me, what are you doing?
So I can
tell other
share
patients.
It with other patients, exactly. What was it? I want to go back to the beginning, Bernie, before we kind of move into some of the stories themselves that have been so inspirational to your and others' patients. What was it like when you first began to embrace the ideas that were in the first book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, among your colleagues, when you were going from being simply a surgeon to someone who is very outspoken about miracles, which is not something that has been scientifically explained?
Well, I laugh at some things because I brought music into the operating room, realizing that people heard you when they were anesthetized.
Yes.
And again, everybody thought, remember, this goes back 30, almost 40 years.
Sure.
Everybody thought, you're crazy. The person's asleep. Why are you talking to the patient? I mean, the anesthesiologist thought I was nuts. I'm talking to somebody who's anesthetized. But what they saw was that it made a difference. See, I wasn't afraid of being different. And I realized that nobody's against success. I mean, we have to understand that.
Sure.
So when my patients began to do better, then people began to mimic me and accept it, even though they didn't know why it did it. But I learned to be a storyteller, too, that if you told a story about a patient, it didn't threaten anybody. But when you presented statistics and articles from medical journals, then you got into arguments at all the medical meetings about the validity, the controls. And nobody, then I would be asked, did you do any research? I'd say no. Oh, see, no research. But when I asked to do research, people said, this is crazy. We're not going to give you money to do research. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Why should a support group help people live longer? Well, the first studies that were done were to prove I was wrong, by people angry with me.
Yes.
And then it came out the opposite. See, that's when it had an impact. Because I know darn well from a Yale student who did a study and came up with very significant results about survival of breast cancer patients in our groups. His professor said, that can't be true. Change the control group. And everything came out the same. See, and then I was criticized. See, it didn't work. But the people reading the study don't know what went on behind the scenes as I did.
Yes.
And
sure. Well, back at the time when you were doing some of this, the Simontons were parallel in some of their work with art therapy.
They started me.
Oh, they started you. They started me too, actually. I met them at a conference in the 70s, and I'll tell you, that was very inspiring. They also did some studies, however. They developed some data, didn't they?
I think so. I don't remember all of it. But see, what was interesting to me, Carl and Stephanie Simonton came to the area where I live, New Haven, Connecticut. And, the conference was about helping cancer patients and imagery and so forth. And I thought, here's a medical conference that could help me. I don't have to, it'll give me new, techniques to help cancer patients.
Yes.
So I went to the conference. I don't know what the attendance was like at yours, but there were 125 people there. 2 were psychotherapists. 122 were cancer patients. I was the only doctor in the room.
Oh, my.
See, that's where my patient said to me, I need to know, because she sat down next to me, and we talked in a different way.
Yes.
But I didn't believe in imagery either. When Carl said we're going to do guided imagery, and I just sat there with my eyes open saying I didn't come for this craziness.
Right.
But when he looked at me, I closed my eyes so he wouldn't know I wasn't doing it. And I'm an artist, and that's when the images and visions were incredible.
Oh.
And so, he empowered me and made me want to go back to help people live. And that's when I started the groups, because of him. And I was amazed at how few patients were interested in it, because I sent 100 letters to our cancer patients, meaning from our office. And I expected several hundreds of people would show up, because they'd bring their neighbors and friends and family, who had problems. And less than a dozen women came.
Really? To the first one?
Yeah, and that's when, my wife said, these are exceptional. And so they became exceptional cancer patients.
So that became the phrase, exceptional.
It was just her response
Thanks
to these
to your
women.
wife. Yes, exactly. Interesting. So what happened then? Because it became a very large phenomenon.
Yeah, well, they taught me what they were experiencing. And I looked at the qualities, when they did better than expected, what was going on in their life. And I would hear stories. And it really had to do, I summarize it now, with their beginning to love their life and their bodies. And the body gets the message, that if they didn't like where they were living, if they didn't like their job, one that was with a sense of humor. A woman said she learned she had breast cancer. She had a mastectomy and got a divorce. She gave up a tit and an ass. And you see, that's those are survivors. They have a sense of humor.
Right.
I have a poem I read every time I lecture that if bilateral mastectomies can't be fun, they're not worth having. And it finishes with, it felt good to get that off my chest. I'm just flat busted now. But, those are survivors. So they had a sense of humor.
Right.
It wasn't if the doctor said you have 2 months to live, all right, then I'm going to go home and enjoy myself.
Exactly.
And at the end of 2 months, I have a letter that ends with, I didn't die, now I'm so busy I'm killing myself. Help, where do I go from here?
That's right, I read that. Yes.
Solzhenitsyn, and this sums it up very well, because, you see, we've been mentioning the word miracles. If you say to a doctor, what do you call a patient, the experience of a patient who gets well when they're not supposed to, they'll say, well, it could be a miracle, it could be self-induced healing. Excuse me, it could be a spontaneous
Say that
remission.
again, please, self-induced healing?
Well,
yes.
See, self-induced healing came out of Solzhenitsyn's book, Cancer Ward.
Oh.
That's what it really is, self-induced healing.
Yes.
But doctors call it a spontaneous remission. So again, you don't learn from the miraculous or the spontaneous.
Exactly. And who do you give credit to for a spontaneous remission?
Yeah. So again, you're lucky.
And it's so sterile. It's so sterile a phrase.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like it's an accident, and
That's right. It's a lucky accident, like a miracle. I mean, people go to Lourdes. It's incredible the numbers of people. Really, because the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California did a study, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, and an enormous book filled with patients, with all sorts of diseases who got well when they weren't supposed to. And as I say, there's verification of people going to Lourdes with cancer and coming home fine.
Right.
Now, a part of that, I don't know if it's anything at Lourdes or what the person believes and their willingness to go there and what that does to them.
Yes, exactly.
And as I said, I've seen people move to Colorado to die in the mountains where it was beautiful. Yeah. And a year later, when I called to ask why I hadn't been invited to the funeral, the man answered and said it was so beautiful here I forgot to die. So, that's why I say you saw these things and you could really help people who wanted to participate be what I call responsible participants, rather than submissive, suffering patients who died on schedule.
Well, one of the things that you're really underscoring here by implication, Bernie, is that the mind and body live together, they interact with each other, they work with each other constantly on biochemical, hormonal, and energetic levels. Literally, it never stops.
Right.
So if we contact one, like the mind, through imagery, through affirmations, through positive thinking, through humor, whatever the method may be, or the way of being may be, as long as it's positive and uplifting and loving, we see that it has a commensurate effect on the actual cellular activity. What we now call psychoneuroimmunology.
Yeah, it's our internal chemistry related to our emotions.
Exactly.
I always say to people, look at Monday morning, more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses.
Exactly.
You see, and it's how you feel about your life and Monday.
That's right, and it's directly impacting the physical body. I mean, if you think about a delicious meal that you would like to have, what happens to your body? You begin to salivate. Everything, the gastric juices begin, as an example.
And that's why the guided imagery prepares people.
Yeah.
I literally ask people about their dreams and to do drawings. So, and I show this when I lecture. If a drawing, if the operating room is an empty room and you're lying there, in a black outfit in a box with nobody taking care of you, you're going to have a lot of trouble. Or somebody drew the devil giving her poison as chemotherapy.
Yeah.
But other people will draw God as the source of their treatment. Love in the operating room, the surgeon hugging them, they don't have a problem. And that's something, again, they saw at the hospital. How I handled patients, hugged them, touched them. The affectionate term became Siegel's crazy patient. and let me go back to what you said about the mind.
Yes, please.
2 examples. One, a radiation therapist at Yale called me one day. He said, we had this patient with a sarcoma of the heart, a malignancy of the heart, being radiated. He said she was having no reaction, no red skin, no problems. So he said, I thought the machine was broken until I saw your name in the chart. Then I realized it was a crazy patient. So he said, I went into her and I said, why don't you have any problems or reactions to radiation? And she said, I get out of the way and I let it go to my tumor. See, that changed the doctors. Because the ones who really thought I was nuts and I'm not a psychiatrist, how can I run a group? But when they saw the patients doing differently, then they became my supporters. And they would, as one said, okay, I agree with her doctor at home. She's probably going to die shortly, but we'll give her hope.
Yes.
And that woman went into complete remission and is fine. Now, because that oncologist had learned from his experience with my patients, it's worth a try. Some things can happen. Now, the other side of the coin, radiation therapist came to me. He said, boy, I'm feeling awful. I said, what's the matter? He said, we repaired the machine a month ago, just did the routine inspection and realized there is no radioactive material in the machine, so I haven't treated anybody for a month. Now, I said to him, you don't know what you're telling me. He said, what do you mean I don't know? I'm telling you I feel awful. I said, look, you would have to be a total idiot to not know you weren't treating people. So you had people with side effects and people with shrinking tumors. And he looked at me and said, oh, my God, you're right. That's the part, you see, that impressed me.
That's right, exactly. Long live the placebo, right? Long live the placebo.
Yeah, but people believe, and so I called it deceiving people into health.
Yes.
I didn't mind lying to people if it was good for them. I mean, to not be sued, I would talk to the family and about how we're going to give hope, what I'm going to do.
Sure.
And I always felt if I had lied to everybody, they'd all go home, feeling good and do better than just, in a sense, deceiving the patient. And the best example is with children, because I did a lot of children's surgery. They had faith in me and their parents. And the things you would say to kids from you'll go to sleep when you go in the operating room, they would fall asleep being wheeled in. And I used to use vitamins, and just relabel the bottle. So whatever was bothering the child, you relabeled it, hair-growing pills, anti-nausea. And they trusted their parents, and they trusted me, and they did very well.
It's a reframe, and you and I both know the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, cellular biologist, who's an old friend, and he has now...
book, just for people, The Biology of Belief.
The Biology of Belief. And so what we have here is the actual biology, biochemistry, or you could say the psychophysiology of hope.
That's right.
It has a physiological correlate, and everybody's going to die. This is not something Bernie Siegel invented, or his cancer patients. This is something that goes on. So the question is when and what will be the quality of life until that moment for us all, whether we have a diagnosis of some sort or not.
I always say to people, see, don't try to not die, because it never works.
Exactly.
But I also tell them I'm on the board of directors of heaven. And the bitterest people in heaven are the vegetarian meditating joggers. See, who were doing it to not die. And then they realize I could have slept later, had a different meal and enjoyed myself instead of doing all these things. So do them to enhance the quality of your life. Do them because you care about yourself. See, one study of Harvard students, they were asked if their parents loved them while attending Harvard. Those who said yes and used nice words about their parents, 35 years later, about 1/4 of them had suffered a major illness of some sort. Of those who said my parents didn't love me and wrote a lot of negative things about their parents, 98% had suffered a major illness.
Oh, my.
And to me, it has to do with self-worth and self-esteem. You know, if you care about yourself, you take care of yourself. I mean, when our kids would sometimes come to me with, you know, things they wanted to do that were risky, I mean, I came from a place of love, talking to them as a father and a physician, saying what I, you know, felt and how it frightened me if they thought of doing a certain thing. And they would walk away. They would argue with me, you know, to pressure me. But when they got the message, it impressed me. They then went and gave my sermon to their friends, see, about how to live, how to take care of yourself. So they, you know, listened, tested me, but listened and did it. And the other thing I learned to do with them, learn from patients, was to give them what I called health days. So they didn't need to be sick to get time off, or, you know, or not have to go to school or whatever it was. And I would say every semester you have a week of health days.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say, what do you mean? I said, all you have to do is come in the kitchen and say, Dad, I'm taking a health day, and you can do whatever you want. You can stay in bed, you know, go off and do something with your friends, anything.
Yes.
And then I noticed, of course, that they didn't have to get sick, you know, and whine and complain in the kitchen about,
the sick day, the famous sick day, exactly.
Yeah, but I gave them health days.
I'd like to go back to something, because I like On a Better World, Bernie, for our audience. I really love when people do something exceptional, like I believe you have in your life and continue to do, to model that for others. You went to, did you go to Yale for your medical degree?
Not for my medical degree. That was at Cornell in New York City. But for my surgical training was at Yale.
So when you did that, you weren't thinking along these paths at all. But was it really when, so you could say you're standard surgeon?
I can tell you what the difference is.
But what happened? Was it the Simontons' influence?
No,
what was it that catalyzed your new way of looking?
It has to do with our personality. Why do you become a doctor?
Okay.
See, and that is not something.
But why did you become a doctor?
Because I liked people. I've been an artist as a kid, so I wanted to use my hands. I didn't know artists earned a living selling, you know, things they created.
Yes.
Science was interesting to me, and I like fixing things.
Yes.
So I thought this was an ideal way to put everything together, become a doctor.
Yeah, your Jewish mother probably said this is a good thing for you to do, Bernie.
But you see, the problem is, it never occurred to me, you can't fix everything. People are going to die. And then all the emotions, because I cared about people. See, I mean, think of a Kevorkian, okay? He's into death and becomes a pathologist. And then how does he have power? By helping kill people. I mean, that's pretty sick. And I mean it. And I'm not blaming him, but I blame so-called medical education, because it isn't an education. It's a lot of information. If they had sat him down and myself down and said, why do you want to be a physician? What's going on within you? What are the real reasons? You know, not what you're going to write on your application. Because even then, this is from a dean of a medical school, he said, most of the kids are writing now, I'm fascinated by the human body. But people come in it. See, when I was literally going to quit medicine and go into veterinary medicine to get over the emotional pain, my veterinarian patient said to me, because I said to him, I want you to help me get into veterinary school. He said, no. I said, why not? He said, because people bring the pets in. And he made it clear to me I had to see the people and help the people. See, that's why help me live, not help, you know, keep me from dying, help me live.
So you feel that the reason that you became a doctor, which was definitely to interact with people, to fix things, to help people, was what catalyzed this, what became the expression of your healing wishes? Yeah,
because a lot of spiritual questions too. You know, I was asking God, in a sense, why do you do this? Why do you give kids cancer? Why do you make you know, people suffer? Why didn't you? So
it became
those are not
existential.
Things that are confronted when you're trained.
Exactly.
But I've looked into all those things, you know.
Yes, indeed.
And questioned God, and God said, Bernie, if you could be God for a day, why would you want to be God? And most people are going to fix everything. Say, I'd stop the war, I'd fix this. And God said, no, the right answer is that then you'll understand why. He said, a perfect world is not is a magic trick. It's not creation. And I really began to look into these things. And let me tell you one other thing that's interesting.
Yes.
I began to write articles and send them to medical journals. They all came back saying it's interesting but inappropriate. That had to do with drawings and all the things I was doing.
Yes.
So I sent it to where it was appropriate, psychotherapy-type journals.
Yes.
Came back again. It said, yes, this is appropriate, but it's not interesting. We know this. That blew my mind. See, that the psychiatrists and psychotherapists had seen this kind of thing happening.
Yeah.
The psychiatrist, Carl Menninger, when I sent him my first book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, wrote back to me, and we became good friends. He said, Bernie, I was about to write a book called 10 Hopeless Cases. 10 people are supposed to be dead are perfectly well today. He said, but you just wrote it, so I don't have to.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
That was a hell of a note from him.
Sure.
You see, whereas
Definitely.
at the hospital, they're all telling you're crazy.
Exactly.
And here's a psychiatrist who says,
well,
yes.
Before when you said when you met Simonton and who attended, I met them at an American Psychiatric Association conference in New York City where all of the attendees virtually were psychiatrists or psychologists or psychotherapists, social workers. And that's where I met them. So they were already attuned to some extent to this kind of thinking. And I was thinking about the anesthesiologist that you referred to at the very beginning, Bernie, who thought it was weird that you were playing music. That lets me know that he knew nothing about the large domain of hypnotherapy, developed largely by a doctor, Milton Erickson.
Yes, I don't remember how I first got introduced to Milton Erickson's work, but I remember reading about him as a child with polio and, and hearing the doctor in the hospital say to his mother, your son won't see the sun come up, and him saying, lying in bed saying, I am going to see the sun come up.
Yes, right.
I'll show that doctor.
That's right.
But I began to study his work too, and this is something interesting I learned from one of our kids. He came home from school in the art class. He had filled the canvas with the word words. Now, if anybody's listening, again, write down words with no space between each word. And what you notice is the words become swords. Boy, when he brought that in the house, it was like, wow. I realized you can kill people or cure people with your words as well as with a scalpel.
That's right.
But we're not trained, again, about how to talk to people.
And that's right. And there's really not the medical, it comes down to a lot of this. The medical education that doctors get is really sorely lacking.
Yeah.
It's just very, very narrowed, and we know this. It has way too much to do with the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
It has very little to do with healing.
Absolutely.
It's
I wrote
very
deans
sad
of the schools that I had been associated with to say, and I still have a copy of this letter from God knows how many years ago. I said, you made me a fine surgeon, but you didn't teach me how to take care of myself or my patients.
Oh.
And they have never written back.
Oh, my.
Because I sent the letter like 20 years later again when the school was beginning to make some changes, and I said, hey, it's nice to see what's going on.
Yes.
I was very happy. I went to Colgate University, and that they now, if a student says I'm a pre-medical student, they have a special course for them about humanizing medical care.
And bedside manner, so to speak.
To see that happen.
Yeah, sure, definitely. We are speaking with Dr. Bernie Siegel on A Better World with Mitchell J. Rabin for the entire program. We are looking at the body of his work from his first book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, to his latest, about the 12th, A Book of Miracles, Inspiring True Stories of Healing, Gratitude, and Love. Everybody knows Bernie Siegel. The foreword of the book is by Deepak Chopra. His good friend Larry Dossey, who we've also had on the show, talking about the power of intention and the power of prayers, is one of the people writing about it. Bernie occupies a very significant place in the development of holistic thinking around healing in the domain of medicine and helping to really wake up the medical establishment to understanding the role of mind and heart and spirit through miracles, etc., in the domain of healing. Bernie, it's just such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
It really is. Yeah.
The gift to me was a few months ago. Watkins Review, it's basically a bookstore in London, did a survey of the 100 living spiritual healers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was number 20.
Oh, my.
And I thought, wow, here I am,
yes.
As a surgeon starting out, trying to help people. And the ripples, have gone around the world. I mean,
yes.
especially with all the forms of communication now.
Sure.
I mean, I used to sit up many hours every night writing letters that people still, show me. Now I send emails to everybody. But
right, exactly.
I learned to stop saying to people, "Where do you live?" Thinking they aren't far away and they'll come over to a meeting. Because they're in Portugal, they're in India, they're
sure.
in Japan, and
sure.
I'm asking them, "Where are you? You want to come over?" And so when people are looking, when you have the exceptional human being, they find you.
Yes.
And they communicate with you, and they respond to the coaching, and so I never mind when people, whether it's a phone call or email, because I know that I can admire them and what
right.
they're trying to do, and they track you down, and they really are interested in accomplishing something.
Well, there's a wonderful turn of events that has happened, and a turn of thinking in these past 30-plus years that you've been at it so diligently. And certainly it's not only you, but you are one of the fathers, it's fair to say, of this whole way of thinking, that you could look back with a smile and say, over these 30-plus years, the world has really changed. It has really opened up to the ideas that you were putting forward back then.
Yeah.
And now they're almost household terms and thoughts.
An example of the studies that are done now that I was criticized for not doing.
Mm-hmm.
I recited a poem once, a paragraph. It's from a poem called Miss G by W.H. Auden.
Uh-huh.
The doctor comes home, sits down to dinner with his wife, and says, cancer's a funny thing. It's like some hidden assassin waiting to strike at you. Childless women get it, and men, when they retire, it's as if there had to be an outlet for their foiled creative fire. Now, I recited that once to a group of doctors, figuring it would support what I was sharing.
Yes.
By a poet looking at the world.
Sure.
And a doctor yelled at me, "Just because it rhymes doesn't make it true." Now, we have studies which show that loneliness affects the genes which control immune function. Now, how many years later? And also studies that show that cancer patients who laugh for no reason, just laugh several times a day, live longer.
Look at Norman Cousins. He's another major contributor.
He caused
Patch Adams,
He caused less trouble,
Robin Williams.
Because he was not a doctor. See, so Cousins could get up, but the doctors didn't feel threatened by him. That's a story. I don't know. Maybe he didn't have it in the first place,
Right,
but if Siegel gets up, it's, here's a doctor, saying
Exactly.
And so it threatened them. And they would say, "I can't accept that," and we'd get into arguments. I'd say, "Look, there are things I can't explain or understand, but they have happened, and you can't deny them."
Love is a very important part, Bernie, of everything you've been teaching for all of these years. Could you tell us a story? I opened up to Becca's Rainbow. I mean, your book is just full of really inspiring stories, one after the other, of what we could easily refer to as miracles, of communication with the angels. You are just not afraid to put everything on the table, and I truly admire it.
I have lived all these things, and for people to understand that the book is not just about illnesses and people getting over it. It's about all kinds of things happening to people.
It's a way of life. It's a perspective.
You could call them all coincidences. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross used to say that. There are no coincidences.
Right.
And unconsciously, see, that's the other value of using dreams and drawings.
Yeah.
We know the future, literally. I didn't think of it, but I wish I had put a drawing into the book if they would have put it in. Because I did, when children would come to the operating room, I'd give them crayon and paper and, draw pictures. And one child literally drew the operating room she was going to come into, that she'd never been in. Some of it is symbolic, like there were two lights and she shows two yellow things on each side and so forth. But, I mean, it's incredible to look at her drawing, and then I show people a photograph of the operating room. And every color, all the things that were there, I mean, she has put in her drawing, and she's never been in the room. And the other is that anatomy. I mean, from a Jungian therapist who became one of my teachers, Susan Bach, she wrote a book called Life Paints Its Own Span. See, working with drawings of children with leukemia.
Yes.
What she learned. But she said Jung was always fascinated by the somatic aspects of the drawings. In other words, I said to her, he knew anatomy, so he saw things in the pictures you didn't recognize.
Yes.
And I have never met a doctor who's been told that about 90 years ago, Jung interpreted a dream and diagnosed a brain tumor. Now, you think you'd say that to somebody in medical school and say, hey, ask your patients. Oh, one of the stories in the book, because I'm rereading it myself.
Go into it.
I left it in the next room, but one I was reading last night impressed me because the woman said she went to bed, and in a dream, this Oriental doctor comes over, points at her right breast, says, you have cancer right here. She said she woke up the next morning, touched it, and there's a lump. And it turns out, it is cancer. But she said when she was in the hospital being examined by the doctors, who walks into the room? The last doctor is the Oriental woman who was in her dream and who touches her breast and says, this is where the cancer is. Exactly like the dream.
Yes.
And I'm always saying to people, if you have a dream and it tells you have something serious, and the doctor says, oh, don't worry, go to another doctor. Because I know people who are alive today because they saw 5 doctors, knowing their little lump in their neck was not just a little lymph node. And the 5th one was so fed up with this lady going to doctors that he took it out and it was a lymphoma. But if she hadn't had that kind of persistence, who knows, when they discover it. See, I also know people who died because the doctor said, you're too young to have cancer. This was a lump in a young woman's breast while she was in college. So when she graduates and gets a job and they examine her, they said, why are you walking around with this lump? Well, I was told it was nothing to worry about. And she dies of what there was nothing to worry about.
But, again, it's one of those double-edged swords. If you make it seem like it's too troubling, that will have one possible effect. In other words, you have to know your customer. You have to custom design the language to match. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
On one hand, you could fault a doctor for saying, oh, don't worry about it, when he might be saying, you have the strength, by implication, to deal with this. And on another hand, he may be denying the person the other kind of treatment they may need to overcome it.
Right. One of the statements that you reminded me of that a friend of mine made to me one day years ago, I don't know what was going on, but I was complaining and, having a really tough day with so much going on.
Yes.
And she said, Bernie, you get upset when you're hungry. I said, no. What do? I get something to eat. She said, fine, then figure out what nourishment you need. And boy, that's to me what I learned from my mother, too.
Yeah.
The curse will be a blessing. God is redirecting you. But, that has helped me for a lifetime. That if you don't like what's going on in your life and you don't like how you feel, ask what nourishment you need. And too often, people need a life-threatening illness to say, okay, I'm, quitting, moving, changing, taking my tie off. I always remember, because I find it almost impossible to wear ties now because this was a multimillionaire down in Florida who learned he had cancer. The son asked me if I would please talk to their father. I was down there lecturing.
Yes.
I said, I don't have any time. I'll meet you for breakfast. So fine. See, I knew this was a survivor. He showed up at the hotel.
Because he was pushing you. He was nudging you.
Right.
Yeah.
And we talked. And he said he canceled the dress code at work because he said, if I've got a few months to live, according to my doctor, what the hell is the point of wearing a tie and a jacket? And, he lived for 5.5 years and really woke up the hospital. See, they knew he did it. You know what I mean? They didn't say, oh, isn't chemotherapy wonderful?
Right.
They knew they didn't have anything to offer him, and he lives for 5.5 years. So he changed the way they cared for cancer patients.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. One of those examples of self-induced healing.
Yeah, I have to add, he bought a house on the ocean, which his wife said to him, honey, if you're going to die in a few months, you've always wanted a house on the ocean, let's get it.
Right.
You got the house on the ocean, sitting there meditating, listening to my tapes, and, changing his life.
It's the bucket list, right? It's
right.
the bucket list. So I asked you before, I mean, it sounds silly because we kind of feel we know the answer, but for some of our audience, I would love for you to just speak, because you speak so beautifully on the role of love and miracles in healing.
Yeah.
How would you describe that?
First of all, to think about life as a miracle. I mean,
Itself.
That's my definition of a miracle, like Einstein, is life.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't explain it.
That's
and
right.
I would say, and I don't want to offend anybody, but my definition of God is loving, intelligent, conscious energy. See, that those things are a part of God, if you want to use that term, or our Creator.
Yes.
Loving, why?
Yes.
You cut your finger, you don't die of an infection or bleed to death.
Right.
Usually you heal
Right.
up, or you have an operation. Your body knows how to heal. Intelligent, because you need intelligence. I keep thinking of all these things all day long. Really, how we make these decisions, how our body does, how plants do, how bacteria do to resist antibiotics. They're altering genes. You see that, again, the potential that's built into us.
Yes.
And, and then there's an energy. We need something to put into this to create it. But when you put the loving, intelligent, conscious energy together, some amazing things happen. And also the mystical, that consciousness is not local.
Right.
I've had a near-death experience as a 4-year-old. I know what it's like to leave my body. I was quite disturbed when I didn't die, because it was more interesting out of it than choking to death on a toy.
Yeah.
And so I've had a past life experience when a friend said, "Why are you living this life?" So again, and I communicate with animals now, because when somebody found, something I didn't believe in, a friend of mine that I met at an ASPCA None-Kill conference in California said she was an animal intuitive. Well, talking to animals, it was not something I could accept. But when one of our cats disappeared and was gone for a few weeks, and we're in a wooded area, I'm sure it's dead, but I said to her, "Amelia, tell me where the cat is." And without even a photograph, I described where we are and so forth. She's in Los Angeles. I'm in Connecticut. I got an email from her saying, "The cat's alive. I can see the moon through its eyes," described the entire house, all the other pets, and told me where the cat was. And the next morning, I went out and kept screaming its name till I heard it go, "Meow," and went and pulled it out from under a part of the house that it was hiding in to stay safe.
Yes.
That blew my mind.
Oh,
but
God.
you see, the key, and I'd say this to everybody, because you were asking about love, and this is what love does. The ugly duckling, and I know this from a personal experience, because due to my mother's ill health and other things, I was born an ugly duckling due to a lot of trauma when she couldn't survive a cesarean section and was in labor for God knows how long. So I was born an ugly duckling. But I always say to people, why didn't I have to find my own beauty? Because I had a grandmother who took me from my parents.
Oh, yes.
And poured oil all over me, and to quote my mother, pushed everything back where it belonged. So I was getting massaged and loved all day long by my grandmother.
Wow.
But the ugly duckling is rejected. Where does he find his beauty? On a still pond. He looks down after looking at some swans and realizes, I'm a swan too. See, this is a quote from a woman. My mother's words were eating away at me and maybe gave me cancer. She told me I was a failure, I embarrassed her, and she only dressed me in dark clothes so nobody would notice me. Now think of that. See, if the duckling had walked away saying, my mother's a rotten cow,
yes,
he never would be able to look at the still pond, because it wouldn't be still, it would be turbulent.
Sure.
So I'd say to people, what does love do? It quiets your mind, and then you see yourself. And you benefit from the love, and the people you give it to benefit.
Yes.
But if you're walking around cursing, yelling, being eaten up by what others say,
anxieties,
then you can't. You don't live your life. You see, you give up your life then to please others, and then you are far more likely. See, these are other studies with identical twin sisters. The one who pleases parents, internalizes anger, and tries to make everybody happy, is the one who's more likely to get breast cancer than her little devil of a sister who's driving everybody nuts.
Yes.
See? So you need to live your authentic life and develop relationships, because that's the other thing. Women live longer than men with the same cancers. And so do married men live longer than single men. So, because, see, this is the craziness of medicine. After reading an article about malignant melanomas and how women live longer than men with the same site stage, etc., the oncologist who wrote the article, and I feel sorry for him, he said estrogen and progesterone must in some way be protecting the women from the cancer. And I thought, this guy either is single, living alone. I mean, I can't believe it, has no pets. Because my comment would then be, since married men live longer than single men with the same cancer, then sleeping with estrogen and progesterone must be protecting them.
Right.
It's just crazy. If you have a heart attack, go home to a house with a dog.
Yes.
A year later, 5% of the people had died. Go home to a house without a dog, 26% had died. And this was a study in Australia by a doctor there. So again, you see what the love does.
Yes.
You have the relationships, and that changes.
We're designed for them. We're designed for relationship with others, with animals, with the life itself, Yeah, exactly.
And as I say, it's now measurable because some study on petting a dog, the oxytocin and serotonin levels went up. Those are the bonding hormones. It's they're the love hormones.
The love hormones, exactly. And we know how to develop them. So, last story. I mentioned Becca's Rainbow. Would you share that with us in synopsis?
I can't remember it. Because I don't have the book next to me.
Okay, I'm not going to put you on the spot about it.
There's so many.
There's so many. Exactly. Well, it just opens up with Bernie's wisdom was a gift to me, as he was monitoring his daughter's journey through cancer. To sum it up, I really wanted to hear you say it. But in short, you gave him the loving guidance that he needed and a sense of hope, and that in a sense everything is perfect, nothing happens by mistake, and that kind of encouragement and ability to come to peace with the process of a child, his own child, dying or at least having cancer was so inspirational to him. It helped her live longer and made their lives much more enriched and beautiful.
I have read that story. It's you're saying it is bringing it back to me. But I think this is where, for some people, the curse can become a blessing.
Yes.
It's again like the hunger. You go on and you do something because of what you've experienced. Whether it's helping other children or, starting a new charity, it doesn't matter, but that you do something with it. And then the loss becomes meaningful. Exactly. I'm always saying the only thing of permanence is love. If you want to live forever, love somebody.
That's right.
Because that's what makes all the difference.
Well, then, among others, I love you, Bernie. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Let me add this, because the rainbow is a significant symbol. And when I mentioned self-induced healing, Solzhenitsyn describes it in his book as a rainbow-colored butterfly fluttering out of the book. And I realize he knows, intuitively, because the rainbow is your life in order, but the butterfly is a symbol of transformation.
For sure.
So you want to have healing, transform, and create that life.
Exactly.
Rebirth yourself, be born again, whatever term you want to use, but create that life that has order. And Jung said, the future is unconsciously prepared long in advance and therefore can be guessed by clairvoyance. So people have to realize the decisions they're making every day create their future and their life.
Exactly. Well, listen, I want to just thank you again for your wonderful work, your great contributions to the fields of health, medicine, and life itself. Truly, that's what it comes to.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Your website is...
Bernie Siegel, Siegel, BernieSiegelMD.com. And there are many stories. They can contact me and, all kinds of things.
It's a very rich website.
Including some of the drawings. There's a webinar there. So if people are really interested in looking at what we're talking about, they can see it.
Bernie Siegel, thank you so much for being a guest on our show today. And we'll
my
be
pleasure.
In touch.
Thank you.
Absolutely. God bless. Oh, such an inspiration. I so appreciate this gentleman's work over the course of so many years. Courageous, bold, not willing to give up the perspective, unpopular as it has been over the early years in modern medicine, and even by many doctors today. They just don't really read the statistics. It is documented, the role of the mind, the role of emotions, the role of love in healing, and it is there for those who actually want to partake. Well, I'm very glad that you joined us again today. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Please join us at our website at www.abetterworld.net. Join our newsletter, become part of our community. We're taking all sorts of actions and educating our public in as many ways as we can to help people feel empowered and stand up to all of the challenges we're facing today, and also to enjoy the beauty that surrounds us day by day, even with everything falling apart. The walls of Jericho are crumbling, and yet we, with our sense of principles and love of life, are standing firm. That happens at PRN. Gary Knoll will be up next to help tear down a few more walls of Jericho, so you can see that, in fact, the illusions of this life and who's in charge and who's doing what are being peeled back layer by layer, and at the end of the day, we will be left with ourselves in the creation that we ourselves are making. So thanks again for joining us. Also tune into our weekly television show every Tuesday night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you live in Manhattan, just go to our website for the TV station. And if you live outside of Manhattan, you can watch it online. Again, just go to www.abetterworld.net, because there we have the player through which you can watch it every Tuesday night at 10:30. This week will be Dr. Norman Suhu, naturopath, healer, and practitioner of biosyntony. We'll have him on the radio show sometime soon, too. Again, thanks so much for joining us here at A Better World with Mitchell J. Rabin on Progressive Radio Network, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.